My name is Mike Meredith. I'm the doctor of Doctor's Woodshop, and we're back here at Northwoods Figured Woods. And today we're going to talk about stabilized wood. Now, what exactly is stabilized wood? Well, it is wood that has been embedded with a plastic resin that will harden over time and with heat. So why would you want to do that? Well, first of all, unfortunately, some of the prettiest wood that we can find is more like a bundle of newspapers than a piece of wood. By stabilizing, by embedding this area, pieces like this, with a plastic resin, we can harden that so that it can be turned or worked with in other woodworking methods, and you wind up capturing that beauty. And as you notice, this is red. You can also add color to stabilized wood that gives you a little bit of extra accent. Now, what sort of things would we make with stabilized wood? Well, one of the things that I like most about it is that you're making basically a waterproof piece of wood. So for something like knife handles, we've got this beautiful spalted piece of big leaf maple. You can see it's got a red color to it. And this is one of the finishing methods we'll talk about a little bit later, where we're simply sanding to a high level and not putting a film finish on at all. This is a good example of a piece of wood that really was not much more than newspaper. You can see the black line and the white rod in it, but yet you put it together and you wind up with this beautiful, striking piece of wood. Now, the other application that I do with the stabilized wood is that if I'm going to make a hybrid blank, in this case Alumilite and this is a black locust burl, stabilizing the wood makes the plastic stick to the wood a little bit better in the hybrid blanks. So there are lots of applications for wood stabilization. You can make anything out of a stabilized piece of wood that you can make out of an unstabilized piece of wood. Now, when it comes to turning stabilized wood, it turns very much like unstabilized wood, with a couple of exceptions. The reason that I point out these two types of cuts, first of all, the spindle roughing cut, and then what we would do with the spindle gouge cross grain. When you plasticize the wood, you make everything basically end grain. So the roughing cut, which would be done on what used to be side grain, you're now actually cutting end grain. And the only difference really is that you have to make sure that you're, instead of scraping, you're actually cutting across the grain with the tool. Now, normally we would take a spindle gouge and just go ride the bevel back and forth across the piece. With a stabilized, this is a piece of stabilized Bastogne walnut, we need to make more in the way of plunging cuts so that the edge of the tool is actually cutting across the side grain. Of course, when you turning anything, normally I would wear a face shield as well as a dust mask. But since you can't hear me very well, we're going to forego those right now. So to make make that roughing cut across the grain, you can see that I'm actually, instead of riding strictly down, I'm cutting into the grain. Now, you will notice that instead of shavings, the long thin shavings we're used to, what we're getting is more like dust. This is the consequence of the plastic in the wood. It tends to break rather than peel. So as we get along a little further, where I should be getting shavings, you will notice we continue to get that. The other good thing about the stabilized wood is it's very hard, so you can turn it much faster than you would a piece of unstabilized wood. Now, the other advantage of that plastic in the wood is that it allows you to plane surfaces so well that a lot of times you won't need to do any sanding. Now the other cut for the stabilized wood is a little different. Is what we would do with the spindle gouge, or actually shaping the wood. You have to wind up again, just as we did with the spindle roughing gouge. You need to cut a little more directly across the grain. And again, if you'll do that, again, keep in mind the difference is you're going to wind up with a very nice smooth surface. And this goes for things like turning beads and coves also. You need to keep your blade cutting across the grain. Treat it like it's end grain all the way along the piece. Now the last specialized cut I want to talk about for the stabilized wood is with a parting tool. This is the tool where we actually would be always cutting across end grain. The plasticized end grain in the stabilized wood means you need to move a little bit more slowly with your parting tool and make sure that it is sharp. That's the other characteristic of the stabilized turning. Your tools need to be very sharp. But with the parting tool, it's the same sort of cut. It's the levered cut into the wood, right straight across the grain. The use of scrapers with stabilized woods actually works very well. You would think it might not, but not every scraper is actually going to work for the stabilized wood. What you need is a scraper that has a burnished edge on it, not a ground edge. The burnishing tool will actually bend the edge up to make a very sharp, very strong edge to do the smoothing. Great for big curves. If you want to make a stabilized pepper mill, this would be the tool of choice. And you see with the scraper, this is the first time we've gotten anything that looks like an actual shaving as opposed to dust. And that's because the width of the cutting surface, the width of the cutting edge, is so wide it's actually getting in under the hardened side grain and allowing it to pull out, or allowing it to be cut out in ribbons as opposed to just dust. So as you've seen, there are a few little things to keep in mind when turning stabilized wood. The drawbacks of turning wood are so small that they shouldn't slow you down from giving the stabilized wood a try. The expanded nature of the wood, the stabilized wood, the color, the ability to turn wood that's much too fragile to turn otherwise, really makes the stabilized wood a very attractive material for the wood turner to try.